Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Okay, Steve, ready to go?
Ready.
Okay, perfect.
La emisión está comenzando. Todos los asistentes están en modo de solo escucha.
Hi everyone, sorry for the late start. We're finally ready to go for our webinar today on energy management for small and medium-sized enterprises. This is a part of our DEXMA webinar series where we invite energy experts to come and talk with us about important issues in our sector. So just to quickly introduce the agenda today, we'll do a quick introduction to DEXMA so that for anyone who doesn't know us can get to know us a bit better. Then we have our special guest, Dr. Fawkes, who's the Managing Director of Energy Pro, with us to explain the 11% concept and how SMEs can benefit from that. Then the CEO and founder of DEXMA, Joan Pignol, is with us to have a conversation with Dr. Fawkes about SMEs, energy management, and how ESCOs and energy managers can help small businesses do that better. And finally, at the end of the session, we'll have 15 minutes for your questions. So make sure that you see the little red box at the bottom of the screen. You can enter your questions into the chat and we'll try to get to them at the end of the session. And without further ado, since we're running a little bit late, I'll pass it over to Joan, who will introduce DEXMA to you now.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And thanks, of course, to Steve Fawkes to participate in this webinar. So for those of you that you don't know about DEXMA, so DEXMA is a company that was founded 10 years ago. We are mainly focused in cloud-based energy management software. With this software, we're helping SMEs and public administrations to reduce their energy consumption. You will see that this afternoon a lot of the talk with Steve Fawkes, it's around data, about how you can manage all this information. So we're doing this software to help SMEs to reduce their energy bill at the end of the month. We know it's quite hard, so sometimes energy efficiency can be quite complex and too technical. So I think that this webinar this afternoon can help to solve some of the issues. Mainly a few topics about our product, Dextel Energy Manager. So it's totally cloud-based, so you don't need to install anything on your servers. Of course, the software is based on different pillars like the analytics, alarms, reports. But not only that, as well, we can extend the functionality to even control. And of course, we're compatible with all kind of metering systems. So it's not only about electricity, but we can add water, thermal temperature, gas, thermal energy, etc., etc. And well, the company has been recognized by several industry analysts that you can see here. And we are one of the best rate energy management softwares out there, at least in Europe. These are some of the customers. Of course, here you're going to find several verticals where we are working together with our partners. Some big, is it working?
Yeah,
okay?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. So some big buildings and big industries, but as well a lot of SMEs. Right now we are managing more than 1,200 active end customers, some of them with one location and some of them with hundreds and thousands of locations. This is as well some of the countries where we are active. So as I said at the beginning, DEXMA is offering the tool, like it's the AutoCAD for the architects. We provide the Dextel Energy Managers, for the energy managers, and we have more than 215 partners active working with us in more than 36 countries. So here you can see some of them, and of course happy to discuss with you if you are interested in partnering with DEXMA. Just finishing the introduction to DEXMA. So as well, our company was born more in the, let's say, the monitoring industry. So we were connecting the first energy meters to the cloud software, and this is like in the middle, what we call analyze. but of course we are extending in different axes the product. The first that we are approaching is how with big data we can more or less estimate your energy efficiency potential. And this is a new product that DEXMA is launching this year called the Energy Grader. It's already available, but just for one site to try it for free. And then as well, we're working with bigger customers with controls. So this is more around how to connect existing BMS in buildings and how to make them more smart. And I think that, yeah, this is the last slide. So why DEXMA? So of course there are out there lots of different tools. We consider ourselves to have a unique offering, of course, because we have made very easy to get data, no matter your brand, your metering solution and system. We've done more than 150 integrations that we call with all kind of different vendors, as well because of the the advanced features that are inside the software. For example, the MMB with the IPMBP protocol from the EB organization, that it makes very easy to define baselines and quantify the savings achieved. Of course, then the tricky part is how to get this formula in the baseline. And then, of course, we work a lot with custom reports, the Energy Apps market. This is to make the software extensible. So there are a lot of solutions that we could say that are quite closed, but we created an open API that all our customers can use, so they can extend their DEXMA software into their customized solutions. For example, with storage, with solar production, with controls, etc., etc. And the last two parts, of course, we always say, being a cloud software, you need to show your customers that you can be really, really fast. So the average page load of the software, it's less than 1 second per screen. And no matter here the historical data that you're getting. So the software is really fast. And of course, reliability and scalability, because we know that the cloud software, it's a trend, but of course we find still some industries and some kind of customers that are reluctant to move their data into the cloud. But we know that, at the end it's an architecture that it's much more efficient to store and serve all this data. So that's why DEXMA is promoting the cloud. And that was all.
Thanks, John. Thanks for that overview of DEXMA. Now with the part you've all been waiting for, we have our special guest, Dr. Fawkes, with us to introduce the 11% concept. That comes from the name of his blog, probably some of you have read, called Only 11%. And he's going to specialize the focus today on small businesses. It's a segment that a lot of ESCOs and energy managers tend to overlook. We all want to go for the big deals, go for the big utilities and the big bucks, but this is really a sector that we need to pay attention to, and we're going to talk today about how we can do that better. So without any further delay, we'll take it away, Steve, and we'll pass over the controls to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today. So I am going to talk about what SMEs and ESCOs can do to improve energy management, particularly in that SME sector, which is harder than the big corporates and the big retailers and so on. So I'm going to talk about that, but I do like to start with context, because I think context is terribly important. And I have a slide. I'm just going to take presenter. Can I present now, Nicole? I should be able to.
Yeah.
I don't seem to have it.
Try now.
Okay, I can't actually flip the slide. Okay, now I have it. Yeah. Okay, now I've got it. Okay, let me just get this right. Sorry for the technical problems here. Here we go. Okay. So you should now have my screen, and my first slide says if you're not worried about energy, you should be. And the reason I say this is I think a lot of complacency has come in the last few years. We have very low oil prices, historically low oil prices. We have lots of gas available from fracking, and of course we have a lot of activity in renewables, but perhaps a bit too much optimism about renewables and where they're going to get us. So I think we have to guard against complacency in looking at the overall energy scene. And it's this context really that drives strategy and actions on energy efficiency. So we really should be worrying about energy efficiency. And despite all the fuss about renewables, we're still heavily dependent on oil. A third of all our energy is still oil. 90% or more of all of our transport energy is oil. And as we know, most of that oil comes from parts of the world which are still troubled, and probably more troubled this week than they have been for a while. So there's still huge risks around our energy supply, and I think we're not really paying enough attention to those risks at the moment. A couple of years ago there were threats to close the oil supply route, and again that sort of went off, but of course things happening in the Middle East this week where everything is up in doubt again. So I think we really need to be very, very aware of the risks that conventional and normal energy supply brings with it. And also other risks. Interesting statistic that the US spends about $80 a barrel protecting the oil flow, but most of that oil doesn't end in the US. And again, given the general political scene, geopolitical scene at the moment, you have to wonder about how secure that will be going forward. And then Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a country I know quite well these days. In Saudi Arabia, which still produces about 10 million barrels a day, they are quite rightly worried about their increasing domestic demand for oil, which by 2035 will equal the supply. And if you're running Saudi Arabia at the moment, you need to be, and they are very aware of that equation, that by 2035 every single drop of Saudi Arabian oil could be feeding Saudi Arabia, in which case they have no exports, with all the consequences that brings. And then finally, just a couple of other quick context points. It's pretty well known, we're expecting another 3 billion people to join the middle class in the next few years, and when you get middle class you start using energy, and so we'd expect to see energy demand to tick up, particularly in Asian developing countries. So then finally, I think an issue that has become more important in the last few years, air pollution, particularly air pollution in cities. Premature deaths from air pollution from energy use are absolutely outrageous and a huge threat to all of us, and finally just beginning to get attention in some places. And of course finally 1.3 billion people in the world without electricity, and we need to somehow get them electricity. So that's a very quick run through of global context. And then finally I think in Europe, we spend 500 billion a year importing energy, and a lot of that of course comes from Russia. A lot of it comes from liquefied natural gas these days, as well as oil. But 500 billion euros a year on energy imports is not really a sustainable thing. So that's why I think we should worry about the risk of energy supply much more than we do, and much more than we have been doing in the last few years. And then to touch on the 11% concept, just to give people the background, 11% was the number that Cambridge University came up with when they looked at the global energy efficiency scene, and all of the primary energy we use comes to something like 475 EJ, and the actual useful energy that we have in terms of transport, quality of comfort, warmth and cooling and motive power, all of that is 55, and so the overall efficiency is 11%, which given that we think that we're in a very sophisticated technological society, I think 11% is a really pathetically low number, really. And obviously, as we know, we can never get to 100% because there's that little thing called the second law of thermodynamics that gets in the way. But even if we got to 12 or 13%, we'd be doing very well and have a huge benefit in terms of finance, environment, and job creation. So that's my context, really, and I don't want to be too negative, but I think we are living in a world of huge risks around energy, and those risks have been discounted in recent years. So, I mean, the good news, that was the bad news, the good news is we're at the very, very beginnings, I think, of a revolution in energy, and that revolution, as we know, is going from this model, the very large centralized power station, typically burning fossil fuels, coal or oil or gas, and we're going to a future that is much more based on renewables and decentralized solar, smart thermostats, batteries, electric vehicles, charging, all of that stuff that people talk about, although sometimes they talk about as if it's already happened, and of course it hasn't happened. It's in process. It's early days for this revolution. And so that's the good news, and it's that revolution that we're all participating in and driving forward. And of course, as people know, this has had a huge effect on the big traditional utilities. This was a cover from The Economist of a few years ago, how to lose €500 billion, which is the reduction in market capitalization of the big utilities. So companies like RWE and E.ON, their market cap has been incredibly eroded, and of course we've had restructurings with E.ON and RWE in order to deal with this. It's just a massive change that's going on. The good news is there is big money in energy efficiency for everybody, and I like to use this picture, which is actually the UK £50 note, and it is the currency, legal currency at the moment. And what I like about this is it's probably the only currency in the world that pays tribute to energy efficiency heroes, and the energy efficiency heroes, of course, are James Watt, who invented a more efficient steam engine, and his business partner Matthew Boulton, who commercialized that technology and actually sold these more efficient steam engines on the basis of energy savings. They were paid for by the savings in coal that resulted from using the more efficient steam engine. So an interesting historical parallel for a lot of what's going on now, selling energy efficiency and selling services. So what should I do about it, or what should you do about it? What should SMEs do about it? This is the big question, with big financial rewards and big risks if we don't answer the question properly. And I think clearly, energy efficiency is still an underappreciated resource. It's still not pushed forward as much as it could be, and there are a number of barriers and problems and explanations as to why that is the case. But it's really still got huge potential for all organizations. We all know we could go into almost all organizations, almost all buildings, and identify big potential savings. So the first thing is pretty basic. As Peter Drucker, the great management consultant, writer and thinker, said many years ago, and it's a well-known quote, you can't manage what you can't measure. So measuring is always the first thing that everybody should do, whether it's an SME, a big corporate, or any other organization trying to control their energy cost. But what are we talking about measuring? Often the focus really has just been on the energy aspect itself, so the units of energy. And the cost of those units, which of course can be made up of fixed cost, variable cost, consumption cost, and various levies and taxes which are charged in different jurisdictions. That's the energy, and I did some of the very early monitoring and targeting schemes, and I'm talking about in the 80s when monitoring and targeting was a new idea. and we were just really focused on energy, and that is effective to a certain extent. It's the way things have always been done, and it's a good starting point, but it's not just the energy cost that we should worry about, it's the total energy cost to the organization. TECO, we might call it total energy cost, in the same way that we worry about total cost of IT now or other services. We should be looking at all of these costs. So it's the energy cost, the units, the capital cost of providing the equipment that provides the energy services in the building or the process, the operations and maintenance costs of that equipment, energy procurement costs, management time to run systems, compliance cost and risk cost. All of these costs add up to make the total cost of providing energy. So we really need to start measuring TECO rather than just energy cost. So best practices, I think, for SMEs, and to a certain extent, yes, SMEs are different and they have their own constraints and their own issues, less resources, perhaps less data, but the principles are the same for everybody. Maybe the solutions are different, but the principles are the same. So the first one is really understand what is the total cost of providing the energy services that you need. And that includes all of the CapEx, the management cost, and everything else. The second point really is about the 80-20 rule and the Pareto principle. It's not quite true, but the 80-20 rule is a good guide. Sort of 20% of your activity probably accounts for something like 60 or 80% of your energy spend. And so it's really important to know which are the main activities and that lead to that bigger spend. So that does require some kind of disaggregation of energy cost. And again, in an SME, that we wouldn't necessarily have the resource or the time to go into detail and monitor every circuit. That may not be necessary. It may be more obvious, but we need to focus on 80-20. And then just be aware, and I think people aren't really aware of the potential for energy efficiency. I mean, we talk about the 11% on a global level, but we know that we can go into most buildings, most industrial processes and make big savings. That is a general rule that is applicable, and I've done it in lots of situations, lots of countries and lots of types of industry and lots of types of buildings. The potential is usually very large, and particularly now with new technologies like LED lighting becoming the norm, controls technologies, smart technologies, those kinds of things, the potential has actually got bigger. And like energy cost and like renewable energy cost, the cost of extracting that potential has come down. The technology, the price of LEDs has come down tremendously. The price of smart technology has come down. So it's know the potential and know that it's very cheap. Another thing is it's always tempting to focus just on the low-hanging fruit. I actually hate that phrase and I try and ban it, but I've used it here because I think it's fairly well known, the easy things that people can do. But we need to look beyond the low-hanging fruit and look for integrated solutions with multiple benefits. And those solutions maybe take a bit more thought, they often take a bit more creativity, but don't be just fooled into just looking at low-hanging fruit. I mean, clearly low-hanging fruit are important and we should pick them up, or pick them off the tree, but there are other areas which are worth attention as well. And I think this thing about multiple benefits has started to gain attention in the last few years, and multiple benefits absolutely critical. It's really, really important to identify and measure all the benefits of energy efficiency, including the non-energy benefits. And I'll talk a bit in a minute about what I mean by that, because I think these non-energy benefits have been ignored. For too long, the energy efficiency industry has just said, spend 100 euros on this energy efficiency measure and it will save you 33 euros a year, therefore there's a 3-year payback. And then why aren't you doing that? That's a good return. But I think it's a lot about not measuring the other benefits and what those other benefits are. So let's just look at non-energy benefits. This is a layer cake of energy efficiency. It was a concept that came out of the US. Cake is very popular, and these non-energy benefits are all these other things that we know can result from energy efficiency projects. So things like productivity of production, even employee productivity. There are studies that show that people become more productive in nice, energy efficient, green environments. Health and well-being, that's really important. You know, it's important that your employees or your office occupants feel good and are healthy. Reduced employee turnover. Obviously reduced O&M cost. If you put in LED lighting, for instance, you get reduced O&M cost. Increased asset value. There are plenty of studies that now show a more energy efficient building is worth more. And that's a real benefit that doesn't really get taken into account when evaluating energy efficiency projects. Reduced exposure to volatility of energy prices, competitive advantage, and things like reduced capex for expansion. If you're thinking of expanding your product line and you need to increase the size of the incoming main, you know, doing some energy efficiency projects can remove that need, and therefore you've reduced that need for capex. That's a benefit. And then, of course, finally, CSR, corporate social responsibility benefit. So there's this whole range, and this is not an exclusive list, there's this whole range of non-energy benefits which people need to recognize and build into their appraisal of any project. And those benefits, you know, we are energy efficiency people on the whole, and so we tend to think that energy efficiency and energy is special, and at one level it is special because of all the sort of global reasons and context that we talked about. But another level isn't. You know, energy efficiency and saving a bit of money is not necessarily strategic for most people. And particularly for SME owners, and SMEs tend to be really focused on what they're doing and on their primary objective, which might be making their product or selling their service. That's what they're focused on. That's what's strategic. Saving a bit of money on your energy bill actually isn't strategic most of the time. So we need to reframe the investment case and the benefits and the way we sell energy efficiency to focus on these other benefits that are much more strategic. So increasing productivity, for instance, is strategic. Making your employees healthy and feel good about coming to work is strategic. So projects need to be framed in those terms, and then say almost energy saving and energy cost saving is almost you know, a secondary benefit. It shouldn't be the primary benefit. So the non-energy benefits issue is really, really important. And then I think obviously we talked about low-hanging fruit. They have high return, and then there are other projects with lower return. We need to look at blending projects with high and low return to optimize capex. And often by taking an integrated approach, it's possible to reduce capex on, for instance, as I said earlier, you know, increased electrical incoming capacity, things like that. Also, one of the failings of the energy efficiency industry for a long time, you know, for years, for the whole of my career in energy efficiency, until fairly recently, most people in energy efficiency have always complained that there is no money to do the projects they want to do. And, you know, that's true whether they're using internal corporate money or external money. And of course, particularly for SMEs, you know, money is usually in short supply, often in SMEs, and people prefer to spend it on their core product or core services. So we need to think about what are the financial sources that come back and invest in energy efficiency. But we need to work with those sources, whether they're internal or external. We need to work with them right from the beginning of projects. All too often what has happened in the past, technical energy efficiency people have developed projects and then gone to financial people for approval, whether they're internal or external, and then found the projects don't meet the needs of the investor. So you know, it's really, really important to think about the source of finance at the same time as you're thinking of the energy efficiency projects. And then finally on this this point, it's really important to have best practice project development. You know, one of the big problems with the energy efficiency industry has been lack of standardization. Every project is developed and documented in a different way. And this just creates a whole host of problems, particularly uncertainty amongst investors, whether they're internal or external investors. It creates a concern that the projects don't perform, it creates extra cost, and it makes it harder to, certainly for banks and institutions, it's harder to aggregate multiple projects. So you really need to work on best practice project development, and as many people know, I'm heavily involved in a project called the Investor Confidence Project, which has a standard called Investor Ready Energy Efficiency, and that really represents the best practice of developing projects. And the Investor Confidence Project is an international framework for reducing owner and investor costs, lowering due diligence cost, and increasing certainty of savings. And it's a way of ensuring projects are transparent, consistent, and trustworthy. It involves best practice and independent verification. And projects that go through that process and through a quality assurance process can end up with this seal of approval, this rating, if you like, saying this is an investor-ready energy efficiency project. And that program is being rolled out so across US and Europe and beyond at the moment, and I recommend it to everybody. So I think the next point really, the final point really, is to think about energy efficiency as an opportunity, not necessarily just on energy savings, but strategically, as I said, to think about those strategic non-energy benefits. And really ask ourselves, how do you turn energy cost into a source of value? Because added value is more attractive than just cost saving. And so what are the opportunities, for instance, of extra revenue? And of course, with on-site renewables and demand response and things like that, you know, there are far more opportunities for extra revenue. Which again, revenue is always more attractive than cost, even though the maths tell us they should be the same. Revenue is just psychologically more attractive. And then other things, including the asset value. What does it do to asset value? How can this project improve the asset value, whether that asset is the equipment or the building or the product? Think about value rather than just cost savings. And then finally, consider energy as a service models. And you know, everything is moving to as a service model. We have software as a service, we have transport as a service through Uber, we have even things like razor blades as a service, things like that. Everything is moving to as a service, and energy is no exception. I think it will take longer than we think because the institutional inertia is quite big, but models where energy services, including operations of equipment, are included as a service charge will become much more prevalent. And of course, the most well-known and most widespread at the moment is probably lighting as a service, driven by LED conversion, where you can effectively rent your light for the next 10 years rather than pay out capital for new lighting. And so it's really important that people are aware of those energy as a service models and start to develop new models. From the ESCO side and the energy service provider side, we need to develop new models, energy services or services, energy as a service. And from the customer side, I think it's really important that they are aware of the possibility of energy as service models and start to demand them much more. And I think we will see that much more. So that's what I have to say. It's a combination of context, which is important, and then some guiding principles, I think, which apply to SMEs as well as other sectors. So at that point, I'll happily hand it back to Dexman. We can run some Q&A.
Thank you very much, Steve. I always learn myself from the presentations that I've seen you doing. One of the things that that we were talking with Nicole. So for example, we have heard during the last maybe 4 or 5 years about the smart meters rollout, right, in Europe and the US. So how do you think that this new data that SMEs are going to have available could impact in the energy efficiency adoption for the SMEs? Do you think that there's going to be an impact about having these smart meters in the field?
Yeah, clearly smart meters are incredibly important and part of the infrastructure. However, I think there's been a massive hype of the effect of smart meters on their own, particularly here in the UK, where we have a national rollout program, which is, like most government programs, over budget and running late. But you know, the meters in themselves do nothing. I mean, smart meters collect information. You know, unless they're used, there's no point to a smart meter. And so I think for me, the smart meters have to be there. But people, particularly in government, were saying, well, you know, houses that have smart meters will magically save 6% or whatever the number was. And that's just not true. And when I look at it for myself as a consumer, do I want a smart meter? Why would I have a smart meter? I don't actually see any advantage. So but the smart meters need to be wrapped up in these energies as a service. So if somebody comes to me and says, I can do some things, including putting a smart meter in. I can do some things in your house or your building, and it means your energy bill will go down 25%, or every month that I manage to play on the electricity market on your behalf, I'll send you a check for 25 euros or whatever. Then that's a really interesting customer proposition. Just a smart meter on its own isn't a customer proposition. You know, smart meters are a necessary piece of infrastructure that can drive customer propositions, but it's up to entrepreneurs to come up with customer propositions that people want, that need smart meters to be installed.
Yeah. In our experience so far, trying to offer this measurement tool to SMEs. Usually the first barrier, as you said, usually it's the CapEx, because they see that they have to install meter to have real-time data and the software and the services. So they themselves are thinking, okay, energy, maybe it's my fourth, fifth, sixth cost, so it's not strategic to us. So if I have to invest money in getting this information, it's not that important at the end of the day, right? So we think that with this, well, at Dexma, on the software side, that having these smart meters in place, of course, there's going to be a big discussion at a country level or European or the US about so how to manage this data. It's open to the customer, the utility has it, etc., etc. But we think that it's going to be an important thing on energy efficiency. As well, related to this smart metering rollout, Stephen. So which positioning do you think that utilities are? So let's imagine that we meet in 10 years time now. So the utilities in Europe, do you think that they are really pushing to offer energy efficiency to SMEs?
Well, I think clearly there are leaders and there are followers, and the leaders certainly are developing those services, and I think some of them are being quite good at that. I think there is always huge institutional lags with big corporates such as utilities. I think they recognize the need. Some of them are doing it, and some of them, a limited number, will probably succeed. But I think we'll also see a lot more new entrants come in and be big players in the whole energy management field and energy efficiency field and energy services. And we're starting to see that, you know, and it could even be some of the big names from other areas like telecoms or IT companies and Amazon, Google, all of those come to mind. So I think utilities will continue to lose out. They may have one or two of them may do quite well, but they find it very, very hard, even though they know what the problems are. They find it very hard to come up with the solutions.
Yeah, because so far I think that there are close to 23 million SMEs in Europe, and I think that the statistic is that 98% of them are SMEs. So we could think that the utilities are like the natural go-to market for the energy efficiency, but of course we have seen that it's been quite tricky during the last years.
Yeah, and of course, any service that you do for SMEs has to be incredibly standardized, incredibly normal and easy and very low cost by definition. It can't be a very big, heavy energy performance contract, for instance. You can't hit an SME owner with 200-page contract.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to? Yeah.
We have a few minutes left for questions. I just want to remind the audience that you guys can look at the bottom of your screen. You'll see the questions box in the GoToWebinar panel. So I just want to remind you that you can enter your questions there, and both Joanne and Steve will get to the questions during the session. We'll be able to see those. So one question I have is about, on your blog, Steve, I read that you want to ditch the term energy efficiency altogether. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and why you wrote about that?
Yes, it's like quite a lot of things I say can be quite controversial, but I think energy efficiency has a number of negatives. I mean, it's become the accepted term. We've moved from energy conservation, which is even more negative because that's about being cold and putting on an extra sweater when it's cold rather than enjoying a certain level of comfort, to energy efficiency. And we understand the term, but we also know that in pure energy terms, it's actually not the right term because we're not comparing energy to energy. We're usually comparing a service to energy, like miles to gallon or kilowatt hours per meter squared on a building. So it's a confusing term is the first thing, but also I think it's a bit of a negative term even now. It's got all that 40 years of association with doing less, having slightly less. And the term I actually like a lot is energy productivity, because productivity is a more positive thing, that it's about how much can you get out of a unit of input. And also, nobody can be against improving productivity. There's nobody that you say, well, I want to reduce your productivity. That's never a good thing. But improving your productivity is always a good thing. And I think at the end of the day, globally, we need to reduce our energy use, but at the same time, we need to make everybody wealthier. I wouldn't want to see a world where people are poorer, and the only way to do that is improve energy productivity, so increase the amount of value and wealth that we create out of every unit of energy. So I think energy productivity is more positive. It doesn't have the associations of energy efficiency, which still has links and associations with this sort of conservation mentality. And I think from a national, international, national and corporate level, productivity is a good target. It's something that everybody associates with. We want a higher productivity in other things. Why would we not want higher productivity in energy?
Totally.
So I think it's about that.
We have one question.
Hopefully that made sense.
Yes, it does. I think it also sounds a lot more positive for SMEs who don't, like you mentioned, don't have the time or the resources. And productivity is something that they are focused on. So when you throw energy into the mix and you frame it as part of their productivity, then I think they would find that very, very attractive offering. We have one question from Carlos from Madrid, and he says, you mentioned identifying and working with financial sources from the beginning. Okay, but do you have any advice about how to prioritize those financial sources? Are some sources better than others? And what would you start with if you were an SME trying to tackle energy efficiency?
Sure. I mean, the first financial source is always your own business, of course, but recognizing that in an SME that may be more difficult. So I think clearly it's about identifying financial sources that fund projects of a similar scale to the projects that you're looking at. You know, there's no point going to a big pension fund that can only invest 10, 50 or 50 million euros for your little lighting project that might cost 50,000 or 20,000 or whatever. So it's important that people understand the criteria that the financial institutions are working under. And there's, you know, a few that are starting to really focus on SMEs, so people like Dual Assets, and they have a platform called CF, which has been developed with Horizon 2020 money, which is particularly focused on automating this process for SMEs, the process of taking in projects and identifying and securing finance for them. So they have a panel of investors behind them who like aggregating lots of small projects. So yes, it's really important to be clear about what kind of financial institution, what are their criteria. And that applies, you know, to all fundraising, of course. Many people tend to forget it, but financial institutions tend to be quite specialized.
We have
and then also, I think, finally, finally, of course, the conventional banks like to lend to their own customers, so people with existing banking relationships are well placed to get energy efficiency loan money on good projects.
Okay, and we have another question, Steve, that it says, so what do you believe to be the most effective solution for an SME to be more energy efficiency? And Enrique says, a one-time investment solution, like, for example, more efficient equipment, controllers, LED, etc., or continuous feedback that suggests behavioral change? A tricky one.
Yeah, a tricky one.
Yeah, a tricky one, because it's horses for courses and maybe a bit of both. But at the end of the day, I think particularly for SMEs, a bit like all of us in our everyday life, you know, how even those of us who are energy efficiency professionals, how much time do we actually spend thinking about our ongoing behavior and so on? I know some of us are better than others, but, you know, we really want to focus on the output, the product that we're working on, or the quality of the book we're writing, or the, you know, seeing people, things that we need to focus on. And therefore, I kind of believe that on the whole, behavior change is a bit overrated. And it's better to you know, get the equipment and the building right, because that will give you a certain base level of efficiency, which will be an improvement on business as usual. Now that may vary with your behavior, of course. You know, if you have a very efficient building and everybody leaves all the lights on, that's still, you know, could be improved, but that's a better situation than having a very inefficient building with inefficient lights and everybody leaves the lights on. So, you know, I think technology and investment is the primary source of savings, just simply because behavior changes over a long extended period is actually very difficult. And also comes back to one of my other kind of central points, that for most people, most of the time, energy efficiency and energy saving is really boring. It's just not interesting.
And not only it can be boring for SMEs who are focused on just what they're trying to do, but we're all, like you said, we're all humans, we're all lazy. We all want the technology and the app that does everything for us, and that kind of automates that stuff that's really hard to change, whether it's saving energy or losing weight or quitting smoking. All of these vices, kind of, we're looking for the technology to help us. So with that, we have a related question about how the Dexma solution can actually connect in order to monitor this kind of behavior. Do you have to install controls? Is there only one way to harvest the data? Maybe that's a question for Joan.
Yeah, yes, David. So there are well, tons of different ways to start getting data from manual readings, for example, or automated systems with real-time energy meters, or a BMS that you have in place, and we can develop an integration to get the data. So if you are interested in this, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, so at DEXMA we did a great work, I think, during the last 10 years integrating all kinds of systems and protocols, because what we found in the market in 2010 is that energy management, it was quite boring and difficult at the technical part, so we did it easy and plug and play. So happy to answer you, send me an email and we will move on.
Great, guys. Well, we do have some more questions, but hopefully we can get to those afterwards. We'll follow up with you with all the registrants and attendees of this webinar today. We've unfortunately run out of time, so we're going to have to say thank you so much first to Dr. Stephen Fawkes for joining us today, for giving us that great presentation. As well, if you have more questions for him, please, you can contact either Joanne or myself. You can see our emails on the screen, and we'll forward those questions to him. And thank you also to Joanne for being with us today.
Yeah, to you as well.
Thanks, guys. And again, stay tuned for our follow-up emails. We'll have the recording of this also available to you. And with that, we want to thank you once again for joining and see you next time. Thank you, Stephen.
See you soon, Stephen. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.